Babajide Otitoju reacts after someone said he is fully a supporter of Labour Party's Peter Obi. In a recent episode of Issues with Jide, Babajide Kolade Otitoju reacted after a follower said he is fully a supporter of Labour Party's presidential flag bearer, Mr. Peter Obi. Babajide Kolade Otitoju said, "I am a supporter of youth and I love what they are doing, but I am still Babajide Kolade Otitoju and not an obedient. I do not belong to any political party, but there are some of the things the supporters of Peter Obi are pushing for that I also push for. I love their zeal." Listen, it's giving, if you want to talk direct, don't cut through the corners. You can't say you support this. It's like you're not an obedient, but you agree with some of the things that his supporters push. And where would that be birthed from? The leader. Just admit. I don't think, maybe it's a thing where he doesn't want to admit anything good of Peter Obi or just even mention it or seem to support. So he's, instead of saying what he needs to say directly about Peter Obi, he would say it through Peter Obi's supporters. Fan behavior. He recalled how the country was long ago saying in the past there was guaranteed employment for youth, but today about 42% of Nigerian youths are jobless. When I was in my 20s, the country used to be good compared to how it is today. He lastly urged the youths to keep engaging in politics because only them have what it takes to change the country for the better. In his words, if our old political leaders had done the right thing, the youths would not be interested in attaining power, but they have all failed. I mean, it's funny because, I mean, I wasn't there. I haven't watched anything on his show and seen how he laughed. But I guess obviously the headline sort of gives some sort of sarcasm or some sort of jab at Peter Obi, because the sentence just insinuates that he's laughing, trying to undermine what the follower or the person on his show said about being a supporter of Peter Obi. Yes, at the end of the day, you might as well just say you're obedient, because if you say you're for the youth and the youth want Peter Obi, then you're going to align with them. You don't have to call yourself an obedient, but you can't just say, oh, I like what the youth are doing. I agree with what some of Peter Obi's supporters are pushing for, and you don't want to admit the main character or the birthing factor of the movement in itself. Yeah, it's giving confusion. This Ogajide Otitoju is not far from being obedience children. How many jobs has Peter Obi created and how many did he create as governor of Anambra State? Well, go do your research. Why are you asking? Why are you asking? And then, when people ask questions like this, it's like, okay, fine. Just say you haven't done your research on the man. You haven't watched interviews. I mean, several interviews, mostly hour-long interviews, not one. And so if you know who you're supporting or who they're talking about, you wouldn't ask questions like this. Babajide, you will eventually be obedient before 2023. Just give yourself time. Obedience will move. It's like the movement is moving, and it's like, you know what? We see potential in you. Don't worry. It will take some time. You will join. But our youth are still playing ethnic cards in a country that is collapsing under their nose. A country that needs to be rescued, and we are still dancing the old music played by looters of our treasury and the destroyer of our destinies. I think there's so much emphasis on the youth. It's based, at this point, let's be honest, it is a ploy for old people, for the old generation to evade, or like I said, evade, that's a strong word, to avoid accountability, really, because you cannot destroy something or not work towards something or not see something pull through, and then you're like, you know what, our time is gone because we're not in our youth. The youth, come and fix it. A society is not just the youth. A society is just, you don't just have young people that just stay young and no. You have people that build a system. So if you're basically, what you're telling the youth is to start again, because you cannot expect the youth to start again, build and then sustain. It doesn't work. So now it's the job of the youth to do the work. Basically, we're working backwards at this point, but we've got to do the work. To do the work that wasn't done, start building, starting from scratch, and then tell their children's children to sustain what has been made, to sustain and make better. Because it's a thing where the youth are the ones to change. It's depending on the youth. The youth have to make it's like, what? Why would you put everything on the youth? Yes, they can be the energy that can allow for a movement to evolve and flow and become bigger. Of course, they carry that energy. They charge the atmosphere. That is what the youth are there for, and they've got the passion and the zeal to even last longer, yes. But as they charge the atmosphere, they have to look to the examples set before them in terms of character, in terms of what has been left behind in education, infrastructure, who we are as a culture, what do you want to pass on. But what you're now telling the youth to do is basically make a whole new Nigeria from scratch. And it's a bit like, okay, we can't do that on our own. You are going to have to, at this point, there's literally no trust of whoever is old and is in politics. But, with the older generation of what they knew, of how things were, everyone has to work together. It's a community for all. It's a society for all. Look at how diverse we are. We can't just depend, one part of a population will be the one to save. Yes, we are the most populous. And that already says a lot in terms of our skill, of what the labor is, of the potentials that we can put in. Yes, that is great. But also on the other hand, we also need to have, maybe they're not recorded, but statistically, lifespan of Nigerians, it's really not good. It's giving 60s, early 60s, so, or late 50s. And that is not good. For example, again, there are pros and cons to everything, but it requires that we all work together, not just the youth. Oh, you are the one to change everything. We get it. Yes, they're the leaders of tomorrow, yes, but they need something before them, because now you're literally telling them to start as though it's 1960, or in fact, just even write a whole new constitution. It is a lot of work. And so until everyone is willing to work together and not just say, what is the youth? And then if anything goes wrong with the movement, it's like, oh, you see, the youth didn't do this, they didn't do this, they were too immature, they were too energetic, they didn't go the right way, they weren't strategic enough, Well, as much as these are going for this, you also have to allow the youth make mistakes themselves, because they're literally starting from scratch with no example. Put what you think in the comment section below, and do not forget to like and subscribe.